Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Justin Allen Rose, and for this episode, I sat down with Oklahoma State Senator Carri Hicks for a Q&A over a study that was recently released. In that study, looked to see which states were the best and worst states for women to live. The study placed Oklahoma on the very last spot on the list for a multitude of reasons that Hicks discusses during the interview. While this discussion wasn't a joyous one, it was certainly enlightening to hear this study being discussed by a person who has the power to help change many of the things contributing to Oklahoma's rankings within this study. Without further ado, this is For the Record. There was a recent study that you did a TikTok over that showed or placed Oklahoma at the bottom of the 50 states regarding women, the states that women should want to live in within the United States. Can you describe the study real quick for the listeners and the viewers of this podcast?
Yeah, I guess I'm not surprised by what was released in this report that was put out by Forbes and Wallet Hub that ultimately indicates the worst place for women to live or based on quality of life indexes is Oklahoma. We're in the top 10. We're number one, worst place for women to live. And it was based on several different things, the economic independence and security for women, so that has to do with the wage gap. Also related to access to health care, which we know that we have maternal deserts throughout the state and our rural hospitals continue to close. And you think about also just the rates of domestic violence and sexual assault across the state. We continue to have the highest reported numbers, and it's, actually underreported. About 1 in 9 individuals will actually report that attack. So it's pretty bad.
Can you move that real quick? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. No, you're fine. That's perfect, yeah. Okay. I heard. That sounds good. Yeah, you're fine. And so you mentioned how you're not surprised by this study. How do you think the state got to this point?
Yeah, and I mean, this is actually maybe the second or third year in a row that we've been ranked worst. In one instance, we were actually number 51, which put us behind the District of Columbia. So, I mean, things have continued to worsen as I've been really kind of looking at some of the data. One of the things that caught my attention when I was pregnant with our third is just the high incidence of maternal mortality and infant mortality. And that has to do a lot with the education level of the individual being able to advocate for their pain level, making sure that they're getting the correct treatments that they need, blood hemorrhaging, lots of things that are absolutely preventive, and yet Oklahoma continues to lag behind other states in making sure that women are taken care of during childbirth.
So what can the state do regarding that? Getting the mother, is it an insurance problem like this, this study pointed out?
We continue to be the number one state for uninsured, which is not great. But I would also say one of the things that we've been working on legislatively and policy that I've put forth is the fact that we don't have certified baby-friendly hospitals across the state. And so what that means and what that is that it really helps mothers during the time of childbirth. So you get a lactation consultant, you have some really great postpartum care that is just lacking overall in our hospital system. I understand that it's expensive to deliver that level of care, but in my opinion, it's preventive because we know that if those mothers have better health outcomes, the baby will have a better health outcome, and having that great start at a quality of life in Oklahoma is incredibly important for changing just the overall dynamics for future generations.
You mentioned in your TikTok video how these are policy decisions, the reason why Oklahoma has gotten to this point. Do you think it's all a policy issue, or do you think maybe the culture of the state can be to blame to some extent?
It's both, right? I mean, I think those cultural nuances find their ways in the way in which we vote at the ballot box. And, whatever your opinions are on abortion, one of the things that continues to kind of rise to the surface, if you will, on these research studies is that in states that have, made it illegal or have completely eliminated all access to abortion care, that those states are lagging behind other states for healthcare in general. So we're losing our physicians, which impacts everyone, not just women. And so, I think these are the broader conversations that we need to have for the first 6 years that I've been here, and 4 years before Roe fell, it felt like every single session we were seeing multiple 4 and 5 different measures on restricting access to abortion. And when Roe was overturned, all of those went into effect. So you just have kind of a lot of confusion around what are exceptions for the life of the mother, what, are there exceptions for rape and incest? Really kind of having a more holistic view on what level of care individuals have access to right now, I think continues to be really confusing for our healthcare professionals who, right or wrong, don't want to be slapped with a lawsuit because they are engaging in medical practice that the state has outlawed.
And so I'm imagining they're going to other states to practice so they don't have to worry about some sort of thing. Do you see that happening maybe with businesses coming to the state as well, or deciding whether or not to come to the state, looking at maybe these laws that they might think should be behind us, but they see all the language coming from some, let's say, legislators, and they're deciding not to come to the state? Do you think?
I think it impacts our higher education. I think it impacts our business community as well. I think if you were making a decision on where your daughter was going to pursue her studies, I don't know that Oklahoma is a friendly place to want your 18, 19, 20-year-old daughter to be, especially when you're looking at some of those violent rates that we currently have. Additionally, I think when you look at business practices, 52% of Oklahomans are female. And so right now, when you're thinking about access to childcare, you're thinking about access to healthcare, all these things that you would need in order to make sure that women feel supported in the workforce is completely counteracting any kind of good work that we're doing here at the Capitol and trying to create this momentum behind workforce. We have workforce. Who's on the sidelines? Women, because they don't have high quality childcare. And if you have any kind of healthcare issue because you're uninsured, it's loss of productivity, and it makes the employer maybe less likely to want to carry you, right?
You mentioned something that I also saw in one of the comments to your TikTok was somebody saying, "I'm glad my daughter left the state." And I'm seeing a lot of that sentiment of either people commenting that, "Oh, I don't want my daughter growing up in the state," or "we moved from the state because of these reasons." Do you think we have gotten to that point where maybe women and their family members who care much about them are now deciding to leave the state? Are they in the right, or maybe is it you wanting them to stay in the state to say, "Hey, we can still fix it. There's still time to right the ship in order to fix it to be better for women"?
For folks that have had to make that difficult decision for themselves or their family members, I completely understand. It feels very similar to my role as an educator in the state. For many, many years, my colleagues were leaving the state for better pay to be able to take care of their families. And so again, I don't fault them for putting themselves first, their safety, their security, their economic futures, right? But I do think that Oklahoma is worth the work. And so there are a large group of us who remain committed to trying to elevate these concerns at the levels where we can make some state level policy changes.
As a woman legislator, since you, let's say, focus on your time before you got to the legislature and after, have you grown more pessimistic or optimistic?
That's not a fair question. I'm just kidding. I'm a natural optimist. It is frustrating, though. I think that I have a healthy dose of cynicism now, and just trying to figure out where the power lies and where those loopholes are, if you will. And right now, it's concentrated in the majority party. The power, has been a supermajority for the entire time that I've been here, and you get less hopeful that meaningful change can actually happen. One of the bright spots I think about this legislative session is that Senator Treat is actually working on the maternal health issue. I had, tried to pitch our baby-friendly certified hospitals, right? But what he has done instead is it's an additional appropriation to the state health department that already awards some of those grants to baby-friendly certified hospitals. So it's kind of the same means to the same end, and so I am encouraged by that. So there are little glimmers of hope that I think that folks really do want to make a difference, but I think that sometimes their religious beliefs get in the way of really good policy making, and I do believe in the separation of church and state, and I think it's important that we govern to make sure that folks see government as boring. They see government as reliable, and I really look forward to the day that government is boring and reliable.
You mentioned something earlier in that response to the question about a supermajority. For those that are listening don't know, that is basically where one political party has so much, elected officials that they can pretty much do whatever they want. Do you think, whether it's Republican or Democrat, do you think a supermajority is lessening to the good impact that government can do, having a supermajority?
I think it's absolutely the antithesis of a functioning democracy, right? I think that you find the best policy where there's tension. And from folks that have served before me, when the Senate was tied, 24 Republicans, 24 Democrats, every single person, whether they were serving or whether they were lobbying, if they were involved in state government during that year, they say that was the best year of policy making, because you really had to work together and you had to listen and understand the other side of the story. So when you have every single statewide office held by one party, a supermajority in the House and a supermajority in the Senate, there's no reason to really force some of that tension that I feel like brings the best policy making to the surface.
Very last question, then I'll let you get on to spring break.
Spring break!
And another thing that this study, I found very interesting about this study, is that Oklahoma ranked 46 for the percent of women who voted in the last presidential election in 2020. Do you think that has some sort of, and not just presidential, I'm assuming we have probably seen this same throughout midterm elections, especially for state elections, because we know people turn out more for presidential elections. Do you think that has some sort of effect for the cascading effect we see in the state for women living in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that voting should be selfish, right? Like, you should be voting for your self-interest. You should be looking for a candidate that absolutely has your best interest at heart to come to this building and represent your voice in state government. And yet, what we continue to see is that not only women, but men are not engaged in the process. And so the very few, which is about 1/4 of our state that participate in every single election, are creating policy that we all have to live with. And there's about 4 million Oklahomans. 3 million are eligible to register. Of those 3 million, only 2 million are registered, and only 1 million continue to show up in every single election. So it shouldn't be a surprise that that 1 million are really making the decisions for everyone else. So get registered and vote.
All right. Senator Hicks, thank you for joining me.
You bet.
I hope you all found this interview to be an enlightening one, and I'm looking forward to tracking Senator Hicks's effort within the legislature trying to fix these issues. For those wondering, you can expect another episode in about 2 weeks' time. This has been For the Record.